The palace of King Xerxes in the heart of Persia shimmered beneath a rising sun. Its golden towers and marble columns stood proud against a sky tinted with pale lavender. Inside, the air was rich with incense and murmurs. Servants moved like whispers, and the sound of sandals brushing against stone could be heard in rhythm with the beating of fear and anticipation. Queen Esther sat silently in her chamber, a quiet figure wrapped in a finely woven robe of deep blue and gold trim. Her eyes, large and thoughtful, stared out the latticework window. Below, the gardens were waking. Birds chirped, fountains splashed, and the rustle of olive trees was carried on a warm breeze. But her heart heard none of it. Instead, her thoughts thundered with the echo of Mordecai's words. "Do not think that you will escape in the king's house any more than all the other Jews." She remembered the trembling hands that had unfolded the letter, the decree signed by the king, orchestrated by the cunning Haman. It called for the destruction of her people. Every man, woman, and child of Jewish descent, wiped from the empire with royal permission. It was law, it was sealed, and it was final unless someone intervened. Esther, whose real name was Hadassah, had been chosen to be queen, not by birthright, but by divine positioning. She was not born into royalty, but into a scattered people trying to survive in a foreign land. She had concealed her identity under Mordecai's counsel. Now, she stood at a crossroads. To reveal who she truly was meant risking death. But to stay silent was to guarantee it for them all. The laws of the land were clear. Anyone who entered the inner court of the king uninvited would be executed, unless the king extended his golden scepter. It was a test of favor, of whim, of risk. No queen, no matter how beloved, was exempt. Esther had not been summoned in 30 days. Her presence had not been requested, yet her people cried out in prayer and fasting. They waited, and she knew it had to be her. A deep voice startled her. "My queen," the servant said softly, "the chamber is ready. The moment is yours." Esther inhaled. The fragrance of myrrh lingered in the air from her preparations. Her hands smoothed her dress, and her lips parted in whispered prayer. Outside, thunder rumbled in the distance. Rain was near. She walked slowly through the corridor, each step against the stone a drumbeat of destiny. Courtiers whispered as she passed, unsure of her intent. A woman, no matter how favored, did not enter the king's court without invitation. And yet, she pressed forward, heart pounding like the coming storm. As she reached the arched entrance to the throne room, the murmur of voices dulled. The room was vast, lined with ivory pillars, banners of crimson, and gold-encrusted statues. Torches flickered. Guards shifted. The king sat high upon his throne, cloaked in royal robes, a crown resting atop his dark curls. Beside him stood Haman, eyes narrow and full of pride. Esther stepped into the light. The throne room fell silent. The distant roll of thunder echoed like a divine warning. All eyes turned to the young queen standing alone, vulnerable, uninvited, unwavering. The king's expression remained unreadable. Would he extend the scepter? The room seemed to hold its breath. Then, slowly, his hand lifted. The golden scepter gleamed under the torchlight and pointed toward her. Relief and awe swept the room like a warm wind. Esther approached, touched the tip of the scepter, and bowed low. The king leaned forward, eyes softening. "What is it, Queen Esther?" he asked, his voice deep and curious. "What is your request? Even to half the kingdom, it shall be yours." Esther straightened, heart still thudding. "If it pleases the king," she said calmly, "let the king and Haman come today to a banquet I have prepared." Surprise flickered in the king's eyes. "A banquet?" But he nodded. "Bring Haman quickly," he said, "so we may do as Esther desires." As servants scurried off, Esther turned. She didn't look at Haman. Not yet. The afternoon rain had passed, leaving the palace gardens scented with jasmine and earth. The banquet was set under a silk canopy. Musicians played gently in the distance. Fruit, wine, and seasoned lamb filled the golden trays. Esther welcomed them with grace, pouring wine with steady hands. The king, pleased by the occasion, looked at her warmly. "Now, tell me what you desire," he said again. But Esther only smiled. "If I have found favor, let the king and Haman come again tomorrow to a second banquet I will prepare. Then I will reveal my request." The king agreed, intrigued. Haman grinned, assuming the queen's favor had turned toward him. As the evening deepened, the sounds of the city grew louder beyond the palace. Vendors closing stalls, children laughing in alleyways, camels braying at the gates. But within Esther's mind, there was no peace. She was planting courage in soil soaked with fear. Tomorrow, she would speak the truth. And in doing so, she would expose herself entirely. If you've ever stood on the edge of a decision, knowing it could cost you everything, this was that moment for her. Sometimes courage doesn't feel brave, it feels terrifying. But what if someone's life depends on your voice? What if staying silent is more dangerous than speaking? That night, sleep evaded the king. He tossed upon his bed, thoughts of Esther swirling. Her request had been delayed twice.
Why?
What weighed so heavily on her heart? He summoned his record keeper and had the royal chronicles read aloud. By a flickering lamp, a scribe recounted the time when Mordecai, a gatekeeper, had exposed a plot to assassinate the king. Was anything ever done to honor this man? Xerxes asked, sitting upright. "No, my lord," the servant replied. At that very moment, Haman entered the outer court, ready to ask permission to hang Mordecai. The king, unaware of his intent, called out, "Who is in the court?" "Haman, sire." "Bring him in." Haman entered, bowing low. "What should be done for the man the king delights to honor?"
Xerxes asked.
Haman, puffed with pride, thought surely the king meant him. "Let him be dressed in royal robes the king himself has worn, placed on the king's horse with a royal crown on his head. Then let a noble prince lead him through the city, proclaiming, 'This is what is done for the one the king delights to honor.'" The king nodded. "Do all that you've said. For Mordecai the Jew, leave nothing out." Haman stood frozen. "Go now," the king said, "and make haste." As Haman paraded Mordecai through the streets of Susa, the crowds watched, astonished. People whispered behind curtains, pointing as the king's most powerful official led a Jew, one marked for death, in triumph. The murmurs grew, like wind through wheat fields. Back in her chamber, Esther received the news. Her heart beat faster. The tide was shifting. The God of her people was at work. The second banquet was prepared. This time, the air was thick with unspoken things. The king and Haman arrived. The table was rich again. Wine, roasted quail, figs and honey. Yet this time, the king leaned in more urgently. "Now, Queen Esther," he said, "what is your petition? Speak it plainly, and it will be granted." Esther stood. Her hands did not shake. "If I have found favor in your eyes, O king," she said, "and if it pleases you, grant me my life and the lives of my people. For we have been sold, I and my people, to be destroyed, to be killed, to be annihilated." The king froze. Who is he? Where is this man who has dared to do such a thing? Esther turned, her eyes meeting Haman's. The adversary and enemy is this wicked Haman. Gasps rang out. The room stirred like a storm. Haman stumbled back, face ashen. The king rose in fury, leaving the room. Haman fell before Esther, pleading. But justice had found him. Guards seized him. That very evening, he was hanged on the gallows he had built for Mordecai. The king revoked the decree. A new one was written, allowing the Jews to defend themselves. When the day of destruction came, it became a day of victory. Across the empire, from city to village, they celebrated with gladness and feasting. Esther became more than a queen that day. She became a voice for the voiceless, a shield for the vulnerable, a testimony that courage doesn't mean the absence of fear, but the willingness to act in spite of it. Have you ever felt unqualified to make a difference? Like your voice wouldn't matter? Esther's story whispers across centuries. It matters more than you know. Your moment to speak up might not come with torches and thrones, but when it does, will you be ready?